Join me as I challenge myself to uncover if he's really all alone in this mysterious place. Let me talk to you for a second. Not as somebody trying to impress you, not as somebody who's got it all figured out, but as a man who's been through it. There's a message the world doesn't want you to hear. A truth they try to bury underneath jokes, social media posts, and phony friendship quotes. And that truth is this: there's nothing wrong with being a man with no friends. They don't tell you that part, do they? From the time you're young, they feed you this narrative. You need to be liked, you need to be popular, you need a group, you need a crew. And if you don't have that, if you walk alone, the world looks at you like you're broken, like you're strange, like you must be doing something wrong. But here's what they don't understand: some of the strongest, most focused, most driven men in this world walked through seasons of isolation. They didn't have the luxury of fake friends. They didn't have the time to entertain pointless relationships. All they had was a vision, a calling, a fire inside that burned too bright for shallow circles to handle. People confuse solitude with loneliness, but let me break that down for you. Loneliness is craving connection and not having it. Solitude is choosing silence to find your center, and that's where a man really meets himself. When the noise fades, when the phone stops buzzing, when the crowd disappears, that's when the mirror shows up. That's when the truth steps in. That's when you learn who you really are, not who people think you are, not who you pretend to be for validation, but who you are when nobody's around to applaud or criticize. See, some of you are surrounded by people who are clapping for your destruction. They smile in your face, but they're silently praying you never rise. They're fine with you as long as you're struggling, but the moment you talk about changing your life, chasing your dream, or becoming something more, they get real quiet. They start distancing themselves, and you start asking, why don't I have real friends? It's not because there's something wrong with you, it's because there's something right with you, and people who live in darkness don't want to hang around someone who's trying to find the light. A man with no friends isn't a weak man, he's often the strongest one in the room. Why? Because he's walking a road that most people are afraid to even step foot on. He's building discipline without encouragement. He's facing demons without backup. He's growing without applause, and that kind of strength, that kind of focus, that scares people. It challenges the comfort zone. It exposes the laziness in others. It forces them to ask questions they're not ready to answer, so they label you. They call you weird, antisocial, arrogant. But deep down, they wish they had the courage to do what you're doing, to walk alone when it's easier to follow the crowd. There's a season in every man's life where the room empties out. People stop calling, invitations stop coming, the phone goes silent, and in that silence you start to feel something. You start to feel abandoned. Rejected, alone, but don't misread that moment. That silence isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's the space being cleared so that what's real can enter. You can't hear God's voice when you're surrounded by noise. You can't build your vision when you're caught up in gossip and group chats. You can't become who you're supposed to be when you're constantly performing for people who wouldn't show up for you if everything fell apart. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is losing people. You think it's a loss, but it's a release from fake loyalty, a release from meaningless conversations, a release from dead weight that's been holding you back. And once that weight is gone, you feel it, the air is lighter, your steps get stronger, your thoughts get clearer. That's what solitude gives you. Clarity. People are afraid of being alone because they don't know how to handle their own thoughts. They don't want to sit in silence because silence reveals the truth, and the truth, it's uncomfortable. It shows you your weaknesses. It reveals your flaws. It forces you to face your fears, but that's exactly where transformation happens. Not on a stage, not in a spotlight, but in the quiet hours when nobody's looking, when nobody's cheering, when it's just you, your pain, your purpose, and your grind. You don't need a circle to be successful. You need a standard. You don't need friends who party with you. You need principles that carry you. And if your so-called friends don't respect your vision, your goals, or your values, they're not your friends. They're distractions in disguise, and the sooner you recognize that, the sooner you start moving different. You stop answering every text. You stop showing up to every event. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't even trying to understand you. That's when the shift begins. That's when you start living with intention, and people notice. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it. Your presence changes, your energy elevates, you're no longer accessible like you used to be. Not because you think you're better, but because you know you deserve better. Better conversations, better connections, better company. There's a cost to greatness, and one of the first things you have to sacrifice is comfort. Comfortable friendships, comfortable routines, comfortable lies, they all have to go. And sometimes that means walking alone for a while. Sometimes that means eating lunch by yourself. Sometimes that means celebrating wins in silence. But it's all part of the process. The lonely road is where you gain strength. It's where you build character. It's where you earn your stripes. There's a difference between isolation and preparation. The world will try to convince you that being alone means you're failing socially. But sometimes being alone is the very thing that's making you successful spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. When you're alone, you're no longer influenced by other people's opinions. You're no longer adjusting your dream to fit their comfort. You're no longer dimming your light to make them feel better in their darkness. You start living on your terms, and that's when everything starts to change. You stop needing permission, you stop needing validation, you stop needing to be liked, because you realize something powerful. You don't owe the world access to your life. You don't owe them an explanation for your growth. You don't owe them loyalty when they've shown you nothing but convenience. A man with no friends learns to be his own motivation. He learns to clap for himself, to pray for himself, to believe in himself when nobody else does. And that kind of man, he's dangerous, not to others, but to the system that thrives on dependency. They don't want you to be self-reliant. They don't want you to be focused. They want you insecure, needy, easy to manipulate. But when you've walked through the fire alone, when you've cried in silence and kept moving anyway, when you've tasted rejection and still rose up the next morning, you become unstoppable, because now your strength isn't borrowed. It's built. It's okay to feel the weight of loneliness. It's okay to question why people left, but don't stay in that space too long. Use that time. Turn it into fuel. Turn it into focus. Let it sharpen you. Let it humble you. Let it grow you, because the man who comes out of the storm is never the same as the one who walked into it. He's wiser. He's tougher. He's more grounded. And most importantly, he knows who he is with or without a crowd. So when people look at you and ask, why don't you have any friends? You don't owe them a long story, just smile, because deep down you know something they don't. You're not friendless, you're focused. You're not empty, you're evolving. You're not missing out, you're leveling up. And the people who are meant to walk with you in this next chapter, they'll find you, not because you chased them, but because you became the kind of man who attracts purpose, not popularity. The world may never understand a man with no friends, but you don't need the world to understand you. You need to understand yourself. That's where the real power begins. You ever notice how being alone forces you to get real with yourself? It's like when nobody's there to hold your hand, when you don't have friends telling you what to do or how to feel. You gotta face the music on your own, and sometimes that music ain't sweet. Sometimes it's harsh, loud, uncomfortable. But you gotta listen, you gotta learn, because that's how a man grows, not in the crowd, but in the quiet. When you walk that path alone, you start to build something most people never get: discipline. See, it's easy to show up when the crew's there, when there's hype and energy. But what about the days when it's just you, when your motivation is low, when your doubts are high, and the world looks cold and unforgiving? That's the real test, and a man with no friends, he learns to push through those moments because he's got no choice. He's got no backup plan, no safety net, just himself, and let me tell you, that kind of self-reliance is pure power. Some people think having a lot of friends means you're successful, that you're loved, that you're valued, but that's a lie. Sometimes a man with too many friends is the loneliest man of all because he's surrounded by noise but starved for real connection. The more people you try to please, the less you please yourself, and the more you dilute your own purpose. A man who walks alone isn't lonely because he wants to be. He's lonely because he's too busy chasing his dreams to waste time on distractions. The truth is, your circle reflects your mindset. You attract what you are. And if your circle isn't growing, if your friendships don't push you higher, then maybe it's time to walk solo for a bit. That's the hard part. We're wired to be social, to belong, but sometimes belonging means settling for comfort over challenge, settling for small talk over deep conversations, settling for temporary highs over lasting growth. When you have no friends, the world's gonna try to tell you that you're broken, incomplete, or missing out. But don't listen to that noise. Instead, use that time to invest in the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one with yourself. Learn your strengths, own your weaknesses, understand what makes you tick. Because when you know yourself, no one can shake you. You get to a point where you stop needing validation from others because you validate yourself. You don't wait for likes, comments, or invitations to feel worthy. You don't chase approval because you're already proud of your journey. That's freedom, that's power, and it's a rare thing in this world of followers and fake smiles. Sometimes people will judge you for walking alone. They'll whisper behind your back, say you're arrogant or unapproachable, but really, they're just uncomfortable with your growth. Your independence scares them because it reminds them of what they're not doing with their own lives. And that's on them, not you. You can't let their insecurities become your chains. A man with no friends learns the value of solitude not as punishment, but as preparation. When you're alone, you get to hear your own voice, not the noise of others. You get to dream without limits. You get to plan without distractions. And you get to heal without judgment. That's why some of the greatest ideas, the biggest breakthroughs, the strongest men come out of seasons of isolation. It's not about being alone forever. It's about using that time wisely, about building a foundation so solid that when the right people come into your life, they don't shake it, they add to it, they strengthen it. And you don't settle for just anyone. You wait for those who understand your vision and respect your journey. Let me tell you something else. Love doesn't always come with friends. You can have family who don't get you. You can have crowds who don't see you, but that doesn't mean you're unloved or unwanted. Sometimes you're just in a season of growth that others can't walk with, and that's okay, because the right love, the right friendships, the right connections will come when you're ready for them. When you're aligned with your purpose and your values, in the meantime, learn to enjoy your own company, learn to be your own best friend, laugh at your own jokes, celebrate your own victories, comfort yourself in your own pain. Because no one else will do it like you can, and that kind of self-sufficiency, it's what separates boys from men. Don't let the absence of friends make you feel less than. Let it make you feel hungry. Hungry for better, hungry for growth, hungry to be the kind of man who doesn't need anyone to hold him up because he's already standing tall on his own 2 feet. That's strength, that's resilience, that's being unstoppable. Now, I'm not saying you have to be a lone wolf forever, but when you find yourself walking alone, don't panic. Don't rush to fill that space with just anyone. Protect your energy, guard your peace. Choose quality over quantity every time. Because a circle that respects you is worth more than a crowd that uses you. And here's the final thing you gotta understand. Being a man with no friends isn't a curse, it's a calling. It's a call to build something real. Something meaningful, something that lasts beyond temporary company and fleeting conversations. It's a call to master yourself before you try to master anything else, and if you can answer that call. If you can embrace the solitude, the struggle, the silence, you'll come out the other side unstoppable, because you didn't need the world, you just needed yourself. So when you find yourself standing alone, don't see it as a defeat, see it as your moment to rise. A man with no friends is not a man without value. He's a man who's learning to value himself. The world will try to tell you that you need others to be whole, but the truth is, true strength comes from within. Build that strength, embrace the solitude, own your journey, because when you do, nothing and no one can stop you. You become truly unstoppable.